So today we're looking at text 1.1, Charlie Brooker's Too Much Talk for One Planet, Why I'm Reducing My Word Emissions. So in terms of the gap, this is clearly a newspaper article, I think published in print and online. The audience is quite wide. It's for Guardian readers, potentially for people who are fans of Charlie Brooker, who's a well-known writer and also broadcast on the television. He used to do his yearly wipes. He writes Black Mirror. Okay, so he's quite a well-known figure. It might also be for those with an interest in satire, because he's a satirical writer. General broadsheet readers and basically intelligent general readers. As there's an intertextual reference to the private eye, he might also pick up people who read the private eye. So his purpose here is to express his opinion about writing and to inform us, but I would say more than that, it's to amuse us. He's satirizing conventions, he's satirizing social media, he's actually satirizing his own writing as well, and he's trying to engage readers with the reasons for writing and with the whole writing process. So we've got the kind of conventional aspects of a newspaper article here. So we've got the headline and a subheading, which is what we would expect. And the headline's an interesting one: Too Much Talk for One Planet, Why I'm Reducing My Word Emissions. And so what he does in the headline here is he introduces one of the metaphors which runs throughout the text. Now, in terms of the voice, using metaphors for kind of cohesion across what is a more conversational piece is one of the things that typifies the voice. And here we've got this semantic field of pollution. So what he's suggesting is that everything that's written, there's so much that's written that actually we're kind of polluting our world. And then he expands on that by saying, I've been overwhelmed by the amount of jabber in the world. It's a vast cloud of blare. This is obviously informal and colloquial register, isn't it? And what he's suggesting here, jabber, that's implying it's too fast, it's incomprehensible. Blah suggests that it's boring, it's lacking meaning. Now, this is obviously he's satirizing the whole process of his own writing. This is being published in The Guardian. So he's deriding himself, really, because he's one of the people who's writing and creating this kind of incomprehensible amount of noise. And then he starts off with an idiom, eagle-eyed, which is kind of understandable to the reader and kind of continues with this informality. So eagle-eyed readers may have spotted I haven't been writing this column for a while. Roughly 2 people noticed its absence. So he's using the numbers here to kind of really satirize how popular his writing is. I mean, he's an incredibly popular writer. So obviously this is ironic, it's self-deprecating, and that creates some humor. Until the other day, when a paragraph in the private eye claimed I'd asked Alan Rusbridger, editor of The Guardian, to switch off the reader comments underneath my articles. So this intertextual reference to the private eye, which is a kind of published magazine, that is also tapping into a kind of audience who read the news, who are intelligent. And then we get this interesting triad of parenthesis. Okay, so that he's asked his editor to turn off the comments, not true, and that he'd refused to do so, also not true. So I'd quit, not entirely true. Okay, so what this parenthesis is doing is it's creating a very conversational tone, and then it also creates this shift here with the adverb not entirely true. What that's doing is it's letting us know that actually he does seem to have quit writing. He's told us he hasn't been writing the column for a while. Okay, so there is an element of truth in this idea that he doesn't want to write. This led to an intense flurry of activity. Got some imagery here, which is obviously also sarcastic, by which I mean 4 people asked me about it. So again, these numbers are kind of being self-deprecating. 4 is obviously a very low number. And then we carry on into the second paragraph. So although the private eye story wasn't completely wrong, and we get parenthesis again, I have stopped doing this particular column for a while, for reasons I'll explain in a moment. Now this one is more of an aside. So whereas this was just the not true, was just sort of trying to be funny and creating multiple voices in the text, this one is an aside to the reader, and it also kind of creates some structure so that he's going to explain that to us in a moment. And again, it's conversational. I was all set to write to their letters page to whine in the most pompous manner imaginable. Now, this is an interesting bit, okay? He's been critical here in the first paragraph. He sort of mentions the idea of reader comments. And here he's talking about the kind of people who would take the time to write into a letters page in a newspaper. And he uses this verb whine, okay? So clearly he's presenting these letter writers in a negative light. No, normally it's children that whine, isn't it? And it implies something, there's something quite pathetic to it. It also suggests that it's unnecessary. And then he kind of extends that by saying in the most pompous manner imaginable. So this adjective is really presenting these letter writers as being overly serious, taking life too seriously, being really kind of self-important. But then he creates a little bit more humour, something I've always secretly wanted to do. Okay, so that adverb really showing us that there's a little bit of him that kind of wants to join in this sort of childlike self-importance. When I figured I might as well respond here instead, for money. Okay, so this is like a humorous pause, you know, like comedic timing is really important. And obviously he can't deliver this verbally, so the punctuation is supposed to show that. You know, oh, well, what's the point of writing a letter when he can write an article and get paid for it? And it also kind of gives it that conversational tone as well. Okay, next paragraph. Let's move this down a little bit. Okay, and then we get some more imagery. Incidentally, okay, we've got these, so we've got a fronted conjunction here as a discourse marker. We've got an adverbial phrase as a discourse marker here. So it's all quite well structured, as we would expect from a really skilled writer. Incidentally, I'm aware this is Olympic level navel gazing. So this is imagery, saying that he's aware that he's basically being really narcissistic. But you're a human being with free will who can stop reading any time. So this is something that is then going to become a cohesive structure throughout. It's a shift in tone. He's directly addressing us as the reader, and what he's doing there is he's drawing attention to the writer-reader relationship, which is something that he explores throughout the text. And so then he uses his kind of punctuation in a humorous way. So here, have a full stop, and another, and another. So this is really repetition for comedic effect, isn't it? Okay, he's drawing attention to the whole process of writing, and he's saying at these full stops, these are natural endpoints, you can just stop reading. You don't have to carry on reading this if for you it's just more pollution. There are exits all over this building. So this becomes this kind of metaphor that's repeated then throughout the text, okay, that you can stop reading anytime you want. And what he's also doing is he's drawing attention to the whole writing process. And that is really skillfully engaging the audience. If you think about it, he's trying to say to us that there's no point in writing, but at the same time, he wants us to read his articles. So it's quite a sophisticated purpose. In terms of discourse markers, we get a much less formal one here anyway, so this is more of a conversational discourse marker. I haven't quit the newspaper, but I have for the meantime stopped writing weekly, partly because my overall workload was making that kind of timetable impossible, and partly because I've recently been overwhelmed by the sheer amount of jabber in the world, a vast cloud of blah I felt like I was contributing to every 7 days. So in terms of text cohesion, this is interesting because it's referring back to the subheading at the beginning, and it reinforces this idea that, you know, everything that's been written is really meaningless. We've also got kind of it through the parenthesis here, partly, well actually it's not parenthesis, it's just the commas and an embedded clause, partly because my overall workload was making that kind of timetable impossible, and partly because he's recently been overwhelmed. Okay, but I would say that those kind of commas and the way that we've got this conjunction here and the repetition of the adverb partly and partly gives it that more conversational tone. And whereas in places he has a more kind of formal and sophisticated tone, and one of the ways that he engages the reader is through having this more conversational tone, and that does come through the syntax as well. And then he carries on. If a weatherman misreads the national mood and cheerfully Ziet heils, if you don't know what that is, that's the Nazi salute. Okay, so obviously this is really inappropriate, and it's something that is either going to shock or amuse the reader. So if the weatherman Ziet heils on the BBC weather at 8:45 a.m, so look at the way that he's given it a specific time to make it seem like this is a real anecdote. There'll be 86 outraged columns, 95 despairing blogs, 500,000 wry tweets, and a rib-tickling pass the parcel Photoshop meme about it, circulating by lunchtime. Okay, so what he's trying to do here is he's using these like numbers to create a sense of a real anecdote, so it seems more humorous. But we also see how then the numbers escalate. Okay, so it goes from 86 to 95 to 500,000. Okay, and look at the language that's also used, all of the adjectives: outraged, despairing. You know, I think it's almost like people are putting on these emotions, you know, particularly with the despairing blogs. That's kind of hyperbolic, isn't it? And that's done to mock the people who are writing them. I've got a little bit of Lexis of social media coming in here, the Photoshop meme, and that fits in with the fact that he's quite knowledgeable about writing and about the whole kind of social media, and that becomes more relevant later on too. And then we get this short sentence, which really, in terms of the syntax, is an abrupt change. I mean, we've had these two here for comedic effect, but here we get, it happens every day. And I think this short sentence is an abrupt change in style, which is showing his frustration at the fact that this is just repeated all the time. We just make all of this noise about all of these little incidents, and then that just expands exponentially throughout the day. So again, he repeats every day, okay, to give us this sense that it's not like a one-off incident. A billion, and here we've got kind of hyperbolic potentially. Well, there's certainly the numbers are keep increasing for dramatic effect, for exaggeration. A billion instantly conjured words on any contemporaneous subject you can think of. So the language choices here are interesting. Okay, we get the adverb instantly, and I think this is one of the things that he's suggesting as a problem with kind of technology and social media, is that it all happens straight away and it's just too easy for us to contribute to all that jabber that's there. And then he uses the verb conjured, okay, which suggests that it's kind of magical, which is clearly ironic and fits in with this satirical tone. And then we get this idea that it's on any topic, okay, so that determiner is showing us that the topic is irrelevant, like people just want to write and make noise about anything. And then we get these repeated minor sentences: events and noise, events and noise. Okay, now I think the fact that they're structured as minor sentence really shows the kind of fragmented sentence, the fragmented sense of them, and also the repetition is comedic, isn't it? It's emphasizing the irrelevance of our news and all the kind of online social media that we have. The abstract noun noise also infers that everything that's happening here is completely meaningless if it's just noise. Everything was starting to resemble nothing but events and noise, so we actually get it repeated 3 times there. Firing, so this is a metaphor, isn't it, which suggests that this kind of writing is aggressive. It gives it potentially a military tone. More words into the middle of all that began to strike me as futile and unnecessary. So here we get a real sense of his viewpoint, that it's futile, that it all becomes meaningless, and that fits into this idea where he expresses it more colloquially of being jabber, doesn't it, and being gibberish. So obviously a bit of a problem for somebody who gets paid to write, that they're starting to see that the whole writing process is meaningless. So I started to view myself as yet another factory mindlessly pumping carbon dioxide into a toxic sky. So here we've got him using the semantics of the, it's a metaphor, isn't it? And it comes back to the emissions in the opening headline. And he's using the semantics of kind of climate change and pollution, suggesting that social media is pollution and that nobody's thinking about why they're writing, that it becomes completely meaningless. And that's really emphasized with the adverb mindlessly. We also get yet another, so we get this conjunction and this determiner combining together, which suggests that this is excessive. It's so innumerable that what he's writing becomes lost amongst all of the pollution. And furthermore, it's a toxic sky. Okay, so that adjective really suggests that it's kind of poisoning the minds of readers. It's all very kind of ironic, isn't it, when actually what he's doing is writing an article and contributing to this. So it's very self-aware. I think you could say this bit is also hyperbolic. Okay, he's exaggerating this, isn't he? And that helps to establish this literary voice. So at times he's much more colloquial and formal, but obviously he's a highly skilled writer. This is perhaps, so here we get this adverb really suggests a change in tone from the above, where he's been using kind of hyperbole and having this kind of literary tone through metaphors, to create this kind of understated, ironic tone. So this is perhaps not the ideal state of mind for somebody writing a weekly column in a newspaper. So here he's drawing attention to the fact that obviously it's not a great way to be thinking when this is your job, you get paid to write. Clearly it was time for a short break. So we've got this adverb here showing us his thought process. Readers' comments form part of the overall word storm. So this is a neologism, word storm, and what that's suggesting is that all of this writing is destructive. It's a bit like a natural disaster. So I suppose that kind of fits into the whole semantic field of pollution too. And it's true I'm not a huge fan of them, but that's chiefly because I'm an elderly man from the age of steam. Okay, so we've got another metaphor here. So I've highlighted all the metaphors throughout in green, so you can see them nice and clearly. It's this hyperbolic, isn't it? He's not that old, but he's really exaggerating it for humorous effect. Who clings irrationally. So again, he's deriding himself. The verb cling suggests a level of desperation. The adverb irrationally shows he's really kind of deriding himself. To the outmoded belief that articles and letters pages should be kept separate, just like church and state. So he really doesn't like the way that people can just comment on every article. He thinks that's really creating just more noise pollution. I guess conceptually, I still think I'm writing in a newspaper. So here he's really exploring the nature of the newspaper writing and how that's changed, even though the reality of what that means has changed beyond measure since I started doing it. And then he extends the metaphor. So now I'm sitting grumpily in a spaceship with my arms folded, wearing a stovepipe hat. Ridiculous. Okay, so he extends this metaphor to something that's clearly absurd, okay, and that therefore is a humorous image. And then we get that emphasized with this minor sentence here, don't we? Ridiculous. So again, kind of deriding himself. These days, most newspaper sites are geared towards encouraging interaction with the minuscule fraction of readers who bother to interact back. Okay, so by describing the number of them as minuscule, obviously that's suggesting that this whole interaction is completely irrelevant. And then he uses the mathematical lexis fraction. That lends his opinion some credibility. It's making him sound kind of like intellectual and educated. And then he constructs an image of himself here, which is a pity because I'm selfishly uninterested in conducting any kind of meaningful dialogue with mankind in general. So again, this is supposed to be funny, and he's establishing this idea that he is basically disinterested in other people, not just through his work, but also generally in his life. And he emphasizes that by describing himself with the adverb selfishly and really emphasizing any kind. Okay, I'd say Twitter's better for back and forth discussion anyway, if you could be asked with it. Yelling out the window at passers-by is another option. Okay, so we've got a little bit more lexis of social media here. So even though he's lambasting it, he does know about it. And then we get this colloquial language, if he could be asked with it, which is a change in lexis again. And this last little bit, this idea of yelling out the window at passers-by, what he's doing as he's satirizing the way that we behave online. You know, people find it so easy to be rude about somebody else when it's through a computer, but there's no way that we would behave like that in a face-to-face interaction. So that's what he's satirizing here, showing how absurd our treatment of people online is. And he goes on to expand on that in the next paragraph. So when it comes to comments, despite not being as funny as I never was in the first place. So this double negative is unexpected, okay, because we expect him to say ever. So he's deriding himself here when he puts the word never instead of ever. So it's that kind of self-deprecation again. I get an incredibly easy ride from passing well wishers. I mean, this is sarcastic again, isn't it? You know, they're definitely not passing well wishers, compared with any woman who dares write anything on the internet, anywhere, about anything at all. Okay, so look at the way he uses repetitions of here, so that actually in terms of word class, we've got a determiner, a pronoun, an adverb, and a pronoun, but they all start with any, don't they? Okay, so that repetition is really building up humour to satirize the sexism that takes place online, basically saying that, you know, if you're a woman, you basically can't write anything anywhere because somebody's going to have a go at you. And then he extends that by using this so then we get the sarcastic colloquial register, the ugly bitch, boo, go home, bitch, go home. So he's really satirizing there the way that people talk to women online. Getting slagged off online is par for the course, and absorbing the odd bit of constructive criticism is character building. So here he's kind of saying that, you know, well, actually, if you're a writer, this is just normal. And then he suggests that actually it's a positive stuff, which is more awkward. Who needs to see types of the positive comments are more unsettling? Who needs to see typed applause accompanying an article? It's just weird. I don't get it. Okay, so he's tried to be entertaining. I mean, I think the colloquial register here is to entertain his readers, remembering that actually his purpose here is quite unusual because he's talking about the whole process of writing and how pointless it is. The rhetorical question, okay, that's engaging us as the audience and making us question the purpose of all of this kind of congratulation. And then the short sentences contrast with this and really highlight his point of view. So just like before when he used a short sentence to show his point of view and his purpose in writing, he does that here. So it's just weird, I don't get it. But then what he does is he positions himself as an outsider. So he uses this fronted conjunction but then right now I don't get most forms of communication. So this kind of links in with what he was saying before when he's saying he's just too old. It's all changed too much. Again, a short sentence to show the main argument he's making. There's just so much of it. And then we get this hyperbole. Everybody talking at once and all over each other, everyone on the planet typing words into their computers forever, like I'm doing now. Okay, so we get this kind of preposition, an adverb, and an adjective. We get another preposition, then we get this pronoun, and then we get this adverb. Okay, and what they do is they kind of layer up to really create this sense of hyperbole, and they build this picture of everybody talking and nobody listening. But then obviously he's self-aware, he's ironic, like I'm doing now. He realizes he's contributing to the same thing. I fail to see the point of roughly 98% of human communication at the moment. So again, he's using numerals to exaggerate, isn't he? Which indicates I need to stroll around somewhere quiet for a bit. So he's coming back to this metaphor, this idea of having to leave the building. And he's saying that actually he's the one who needs to leave the building because he's the one who's had enough of all of this writing. So after my break and a rethink, I'll quietly return later in the year to write something slightly different, slightly less regularly. Okay, so we get this discourse marker after my break, which again is kind of more of a conversational one. And then we get this repeated adverb, slightly, really creating some humour because that suggests that not much is going to change. And this aside is humorous as well, probably fortnightly. So it's like, you know, not much of a change to go from writing weekly to writing fortnightly. In other words, I'm reducing my carbon emissions. So he comes back to this pollution metaphor, which really helps to create that text cohesion. We get a fronted conjunction here, creating that conversational tone again. And whatever the new thing I'm writing turns out to be, it'll appear both online, still accompanied by the requisite string of comments, and in the newspaper, which is a foldable thing made of paper containing words and pictures, which catches fire easily and is sometimes left on trains. I mean, obviously he's satirizing it here again, okay? What he's doing is implying that people no longer even know what a newspaper is. And then we finish with this imperative, now get out. Now this imperative is rude. Basically he's dismissing his audience, telling them to go away, but it's part of the way that he skillfully engages us throughout, and it mirrors the earlier metaphor of the building structure, so it also creates more text cohesion.